Global Talk. Welcome.
Bienvenidos a la cuarta temporada de Global Talks. Para mí es un gusto estar el día de hoy con todos ustedes. En esta cuarta temporada hablaremos con grandes exponentes del mundo de los negocios, que nos compartirán su expertise en diversos temas que ayudarán a tu empresa a sumarse a la hoy en día. Sin duda, el Nearshoring es una tendencia que ha venido a revolucionar todo México. Es una oportunidad única que puede potenciar el crecimiento económico y el desarrollo económico de nuestro país, generar riqueza y sobre todo atraer grandes cadenas de suministro a nuestro país. Y es por eso que el día de hoy me da mucho gusto que nos acompañe Jeffrey Cartwright, quien es experto en Nearshoring y nos compartirá el día de hoy. Jeffrey nos acompaña desde Estados Unidos y me gustaría leerles brevemente su perfil para conocer un poco más de la experiencia de Jeffrey. Jeffrey Cartwright es un experimentado ejecutivo que durante los últimos 9 años ha liderado una firma de consultoría de gestión especializada en estrategia empresarial, mejoras operativas y crecimiento de ingresos, con un enfoque en empresas de productos de consumo e industriales. Ha supervisado más de 30 adquisiciones, logrando un crecimiento significativo de ingresos y mejoras operativas. Antes de fundar Shoreview Management Advisors, fue presidente y director de operaciones de Eagle Products, donde impulsó un crecimiento significativo. En 2020, se convirtió en socio fundador de Mexico Strategic Sourcing Alliance, enfocada en trasladar el abastecimiento de China hacia México. También tiene una profunda experiencia en operaciones, cadena de suministro y abastecimiento en China, liderazgo de ventas con Walmart, incluyendo 6 premios al proveedor del año en 4 departamentos diferentes: Sam's, Costco, Target, Lowe's, Office Depot, entre otros. Ha introducido nuevas categorías de productos con márgenes muy mejorados, lanzamientos de nuevas marcas y logró una colocación en Target, Walmart, Costco y otros minoristas importantes. Le quiero dar la bienvenida a Jeffrey. Jeffrey, it's a pleasure to have you here in our podcast. Welcome, and thank you very much for accepting this invitation.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the honor of your visit. We are very happy to have you here in Portugal, one of the most important events in Latin America for digital commerce, cross-border commerce, and internationalization. Thank you very much for your presence today, Jeffrey. And if you wish, we can get started with the first question.
Sure, please.
So, Jeffrey, what role do you think Mexico plays in the nearshoring trend?
I think Mexico plays a very important role. Let me divide the nearshoring argument into two things. One is the U.S. has had a trade war with China for over 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's not getting better. Just 2 days ago, we extended restrictions on China importing more semiconductors from the U.S. and from around the world. Wow. So the trade war gets a little worse each week.
Oh, come on.
So one of the things is for certain, the U.S. is leaving China in a big way with a lot of different products. But it's not just the U.S. Germany is leaving, France is leaving, and Mexico should leave also. We'll set that apart for a little bit later. But that is leaving China. The big question is, where do we go? The U.S. labor rates are too expensive. So that product is not being under the definition of what we say is reshoring. That means something went to China to be at a lower cost labor-wise and is coming back to the U.S. Mm-hmm. It's not possible. Our labor rates are way too high. Mm-hmm. But Latin America, Mexico in particular, because of the proximity, same time zone, the free trade agreement, USMCA, has a lot of advantages. So that should be our first choice as we bring products back across the Pacific Ocean. Mm-hmm. It should be to Mexico. Mm-hmm. Having said that, a lot of things are rather easy to go do, and some are more difficult to go do. For example, on the easy things to go do, if it's automotive related, mm-hmm. Our countries have been partnering together for a long time, 30 plus years, right? Yes, and so we know and we understand each other, and that is a relatively easy project. Even if it's coming from China to bring back a component, mm-hmm. It's relatively easy because the end user or the assembly plant is here in Mexico or in the U.S.
Or in the U.S.
When you mentioned in the introduction is I do consumer products. Mm-hmm. That's more difficult because the consumer products industry in many cases does not exist in Mexico from a manufacturing standpoint. So if it did exist, when China entered the WTO in the early 2000s, plants closed in the US, I closed some, in Mexico closed some, and all of that chased low-cost labor to China. Now we want to bring those back because the labor rate in Mexico is a little lower than China. We don't have the tariff war going on with Mexico like we do with China, with a 25% tariff on 70% of the goods that the U.S. imports from China. So it's very favorable right now. But the problem is we don't have a cluster of industries organized around that consumer product. Can I give you an example?
Yes, please.
I would like to do luggage in Mexico.
Okay.
So luggage, I have a bag over there. It's to me. By the way, I know the senior executives at Samsonite, which is the company that owns Toomey. And so here's the dilemma. There's cut and sew in Mexico for final assembly on that bag. So we can get that labor and we can do that in Mexico. However, the fabric doesn't exist in Mexico. It left, again, when China entered the WTO. So that fabric is all made in China. So I need someone, if we're going to localize it into Mexico, to make that fabric, particularly that's ballistic nylon, to make that in Mexico or somewhere that doesn't have a tariff. Because in order to import tariff-free from Mexico to the U.S. on goods that have been made in China, I have to have a majority of the value added here in Mexico.
Yes, right.
So if I just do labor, but I bring the fabric from China, I don't avoid the tariff.
Oh, yes.
So now if I go down through that product again, it does have some leather handles and some zippers. Those are made in Mexico, so that helps. Now let's go if I want to do a travel bag on the airplane. That has an extendable handle. There are 2 extendable handle factories in southern China, none in Mexico. So I'm having a dialogue in 2 weeks with a company in Monterrey to make extendable handles. So once I get extendable handles here, I'm having a dialogue, by the way, in Colombia to make the ballistic nylon fabric and import it into Mexico. I will now have a majority of the product not made in China.
Right, yes.
Our first project is quite small. It's only about $5 million to do luggage. We have a project going on right now. But that industry imported into the U.S. from China right now has a 25% tariff, and it's in excess of $3 billion worth of imports. So once we begin the manufacturing, we begin a cluster of factories that can support the final assembly, then we can roll up or we can move a lot of things out of China to Mexico.
Yeah, I think...
So it'd be that type of example. I have lots of other projects going on, but I thought that one would be quite explanatory, and we can do the labor further south where it's a little bit lower cost and where there's higher unemployment. And then we can do the handles further north where it's more skilled labor and other things. And even the state of Guanajuato can benefit from the leather accoutrements on the bag.
This is our specialty in the leather garments is a whole industry in the state. But certainly, as you said, nearshoring runs very fast, and probably to relocate these kind of suppliers in Mexico, or even to make the development for those suppliers take time. So that's the big challenge that we are facing, isn't it? Yes.
It is. Yes. It does take time. And I would go back to this point, Luis. When we talk about nearshoring, it's really easy to understand strategically. When we come down to execute it, we're talking about a factory having to make goods. It's a detailed project. If I go back to that luggage example, handle, wheels, fabric, cut and sew, packaging. I have 5 sub-projects that I have to get done. So it's much more complex than just thinking about it up here.
People used to say now that nearshoring is in the business every day. That Mexico is the new China. Are you agreeing with that?
I actually did a seminar a few years ago before. I've been doing the nearshoring thing for about 5 years. So when I first started that as a strategic complement to my consulting business, the very first seminar I put on in Dallas for the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, I titled it Mexico, the New China.
Thank you. Nearshoring could be the key to boosting Mexico's economy.
Yes.
What do you think we need to join it?
I'm not sure the question.
What does Mexico needs to do? I mean, the Mexican industry in order to embrace this
Okay.
big opportunity called nearshoring and supply chain.
Well,
relocation.
I think there's a couple of things, and again, I'll be talking about those later today. The first thing is we have to remember we're not in categories that we were in before, so we're going to have to do business differently. So if you're a factory owner and you're used to making something, we're going to ask you to make something based upon your core capabilities that's radically different.
Right.
And change is uncomfortable to a lot of people. So that's first, is a positive attitude to doing something different. Second, and this is probably one of the biggest obstacles that I see, Luis, is factory owners will rely on their existing suppliers for providing materials, and those existing suppliers might not be cost effective. Here's the difference. When we were looking at moving back to the maquiladora movement, moving manufacturing from the US to Mexico, huge labor advantage. You're competing against the US, Mexico will win every day. Now we're competing against China. They're more efficient, their cost is, they're more well developed in terms of cost structure and efficiency. We can't afford to have inefficient suppliers. So we need to not just do the final assembly or the final manufacturing cost effectively and competitively. We need to go back and challenge every single element that's being supplied to the factory. And typically we like to go to our network of people that we know and trust, but that might not be the one that you need to go forward.
Yes, it's very interesting. Which facilitates trade between our country, the United States and Canada? Regarding the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, how can we make it easier to facilitate the trade among these three countries?
So let me speak to this a little bit differently. First of all, when we talk about trade, it ultimately looks at job creation. Jobs are not created on the production side. They're created on the demand side. So where are we selling these products? Where is the demand? And typically the largest market in the world is the US. At 25% of global GDP is spent in the US. So we need to study the products that are sold in the US, and then we need to back up and understand how to manufacture those. So to facilitate that, we need a lot of folks from Mexico to come in and look at products in the US and look at their technology and say, I might can make that. And now we have a more willing group of factories in Mexico for that. That's one. Second, and this is a little bit of a thing I run into from time to time. I need to import samples into Mexico, and the product isn't within the Mexico NOM system. So now I have a problem. I need to bring a product across the border, and then I have to apply for registration under NOMS and take a year and a half. That's almost restraint of trade. I can't get the sample in. If I label it sample, it's still sometimes confiscated by Mexican customs. So typically what we have to go do is think of an alternative way to come through the border. Personal luggage, and that's fine if I'm carrying something small.
Yes, but not big.
What if I have something big?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Right. So we need to look at that process of how do we ship samples in. I'm not trying to avoid paying value-added tax or any of that, but there is a regulatory environment behind that sometimes, particularly in electronics goods, in medical goods, and other things that require it to be registered in Mexico before it can be imported. And it's not been made in Mexico, and nobody's done the registration, and it's going to be a year and a half or two before we can actually make it. So there's plenty of time to do the registration. It shouldn't be in trying to get the first sample across. But that would help simplify lots of things for lots of people.
Which recommendation can you give us to all the businessmen, all the medium and small size Mexican companies that want to join the nearshoring? What are the big challenges that we are facing, and what are the big opportunities that are on the way in the beyond?
Let me go in a different direction. I have about 40 clients right now that we're nearshoring into Mexico. So we have a lot of activity. My biggest obstacle is knowing who does what in Mexico. If I want to know who does what in China, I can go on to Alibaba or go to the Canton Fair
That's a big-
or the Shanghai Hardware Show, and there will be 20,000
Options,
companies,
yes. Uh-huh.
you know, showing product at those shows. So I, as a buyer, can walk there and I can find things that I might want and then
Yes.
think about design and changing it. I can find factories easily in China. If I want to find a factory in the US, we have a system called Thomas Register, which is now thomas.net. So I type in the name of the factory or the name of the product that I would like, and it gives me back 50 or 100 factories that make that type of product.
Wow. Rank
I
it.
come to Mexico. It's more of word of a mouth in terms of trying to find
Recommendations,
out
mouth to mouth.
recommendations, networking. So if let's say if I need 5 factories to be able to make that camera stand, I've got to network with a number of people to be able to try to identify factories that make the tubular steel, that make the injection molded parts, or make the spring mechanisms to make that camera stand. So I've got to do a month or two's worth of research before I can even talk to anybody. So if we had more transparency about who does what, it would make the nearshoring so much easier.
Yeah, and it takes time and
Yep.
and it's quite difficult because, for example, in Guanajuato we have that database actually currently, but not in other states.
I was going to say, in Guanajuato, you
Yeah.
have that.
Yes. but-
It's not in Chihuahua. It's not in Nuevo León. It's not in District
No.
Federale. It's not in Aguascalientes.
yeah, and then
You're so much further ahead in that area than other states.
yes, it's a big challenge, and there was probably there are plenty of hidden treasures, but how we can get in touch with those hidden treasures if we doesn't have the proper database that
Right.
yeah yes.
Let me also suggest this from a Mexican factory owner. Not only is it being in the registered database like you're talking about, but when I try to Google something, many companies in Mexico are not very good at organizing their website to go and identify what they make. It might be about the history of the company, it might be about this, but it's not about product. I love that they have a great history, 3 generations old. I'm buying product.
Yes, from the
And
grandfather.
I can't find it. So to do a little bit better for all of I would suggest this for everybody that has a website and for those that don't, get on there and maybe go ahead and try to Google search and see if you can find your own product or your own company. That would be very helpful. Then we can have people go in and do Google searches and identify things.
There is a big opportunity to
Yes, I think
become more
so.
pragmatic.
Again, so it's not quite marketing, but it's about visibility.
Yes, it is. That is very important advice. There are 2 final questions, Jeffrey. In which sectors do you think Mexico could have the greatest opportunities?
I think things are going to change. In the past, the greatest opportunities for Mexico have been the auto industry, medical devices, and aerospace.
I respect.
Those are not going to be the big opportunities going forward. Aerospace might be because of all the geopolitical things going on we have countries at war with each other, which we didn't have. We are needing to stock up defense supplies. So aerospace may come into that in terms of supporting that from missiles or drones or whatever is in that general category. So I think that one's fine. I think it is going to be consumer products. And I was just sitting in a room over there. They were going to do makeup.
Okay.
So I'm looking around the room and I'm saying, I could do that here. I could do that here. I used to buy that I started up a plant in China to do hairbrushes. So I'll just give you a thing on hairbrushes, just a simple hairbrush.
Oh, yes.
There's a plant starting up in Monterrey to do 6 million of those a year for us.
Yes, great.
And they're all
opportunity.
from China right now, but in 2 or 3 years, you'll be able to buy all your hairbrushes in Mexico.
In Mexico, yes.
But it's that type of thing. What can we go do? Now, why do I bring that one out? We have 700 injection molded factories in Mexico, and it's injection molded. We need a bristle machine to create the bristles that go on the end of the hairbrush. Available in Germany, we can buy that machine. So now we're into a whole new industry.
Yes. yes. There is plenty of opportunities there.
But again, it's coming back and challenging. I have machines that can do injection molding. Where are injection molded products that no one in Mexico is doing?
Yes, yeah. We need a database. And the final question, Jeffrey, what should companies do?
Again, in what way?
What the companies must be focused on in order to be part of this opportunity?
Well, let me answer this one a little bit differently. Mexico is a terrific manufacturer. Again, I mentioned those three industries. That's a zero defects mentality. It is high quality. It is superbly executed on the manufacturing floor. Now I'm going into a consumer product that doesn't require those standards. If that hairbrush that I use is just a little bit misshapen, we don't need to go into 10 levels of quality systems and management. It's fine. It's suitable and useful for that woman or for my granddaughter to use without going all the way here. And if we go all the way here in terms of quality systems, we add cost. So we need the appropriate quality for the appropriate kind of product. So I guess what I'm saying there a little bit is in the quality systems, when we're talking about some things, relax. It doesn't have to be that perfect. It needs to be good, but it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, there is a big opportunity in the consumer products.
Yes, I think so.
So thank you very much, Jeffrey, for your time, for your experience, and have a very good luck in your speech, in your next conference.
Thank you.
We're expecting to listen to you. Thank you very much for your presence here with us in the Global Talks podcast, and thank you very much to all of you. Muchísimas gracias a todos los que nos siguen, nos acompañan en este podcast y esperamos muy pronto tenerlos en el próximo. Hasta la vista.
Gracias por escuchar Global Talk, un podcast de COFOSE, Coordinadora de Fomento al Comercio Exterior del Estado de Guanajuato. Hasta la próxima.
Guanajuato, Grandeza de México, Gobierno del Estado.